Now we're looking at testing and interviewing potential recruits. I mean, the purpose of testing and interviewing is to try and filter out the people who are really not suitable, and ideally you're trying to then select the best of those who are capable. I mean, hopefully the basic qualifications that will screen out, that can be screened out through just looking at people's CVs or biodata. And this sort of CV biodata filtering is very crude, so only filter out the things which are really obvious, that are objectively obvious. Okay, then we move on to testing. So you filtered out in a very crude fashion, just by looking at people's CVs. Then we move into a slightly more detailed stage of testing, which is where you're then trying to filter out those people who don't have the necessary skills. So we've looked at qualifications in the broad one. Then we filter, and we try to, through some sort of testing process, we try to assess, do people have the skills that we're looking for necessary to do this job? And then finally, in interviewing, you then get down to trying to, anybody who enters the interview process is capable, they are qualified, and they have the skills necessary to do the job. So the interview is then trying to work out which is the person that I would most prefer to have working in this role. So there you're looking about characteristics, how well they fit in with the team, and the things which really are hard to spot on paper. It can also be that sometimes interviewing process may be checking that they have that they can really prove some of the claims that they have made, maybe. So filtering at the CV and the biodata level, that's very cheap. It's very easy. In an hour, you can get through many CVs. You can easily flick through and say, yes, this one is qualified. No, this one is not. It's a very quick and easy process that doesn't require a lot of skill. Testing is far more costly. In an hour, maybe only 10 people could be tested by somebody, giving them a specific test to see, can you do this? And of course, interviewing is then the most expensive of all, because in an hour, probably only 2 or maybe 3 people can be assessed. And you usually have multiple interviewers who are involved. So, interviewing is obviously the most expensive. So you want to try and filter as carefully as you can. Then you test as carefully as you can, so that as things are getting more expensive, you are spending the least amount of resource necessary to do that interviewing. So you only are interviewing people that you're absolutely sure are capable of doing the job, because they have both got the qualifications and the skills. Okay, so how do we design a test that is suitable? Well, I honestly think the most important thing is to work backwards from what you really want. Think about the JD. Think about, therefore, the qualifications, the experience, the skills that are necessary to fulfill that JD. Which things in there are easy to test for? Qualifications are easy to test. They don't need to be in this test. They need to be in the earlier stage of just filtering out. But if there are specific skills, can this person communicate well? Can this person analyze a piece of data? Can this person create something? Can this person conduct a particular task, etc.? You can, there's bound to be some key tasks, skills, things that you can objectively test. that you then try and build into your test. And then you want to make a table of which tests are going to test for which skills. And then maybe you want to highlight or weight these various tests and give them different scores, depending on what it is that you are wanting to get to. But yeah, this sort of bottom line is going to be there. If you want X, you have to think, how could I best test for X? And then as you devise your various tests, you weight those scores and you create a table for recording the scores. Often people focus on very practical things here, but I think you can also test for attitudes and values, which are actually far more important than qualifications. So make sure you are testing for what you need, so that when you get to the end, before you start the interview process, you should be at the point where you know everybody who is stepping up for an interview, you are confident that they could do the job. Because interviewing is the most expensive, and so you want to only be having 2 or 3 people coming through to that stage. Okay, so how do we design an interview then? Well, an interview requires starting with a series of very open questions. By open questions, I mean things like, tell me about, describe a situation when, give me an example of such and such, explain what you did when happened, what led you to think such and such. It's, these very open questions where you're inviting them to describe a situation. But do be very specific in your own mind. What is it you are looking for? It might appear to be a fluffy question to the person who is answering it, but you have to have in mind, what are you looking for? I don't just want them to talk and see what they say. No, I want to find out what is their attitude about disability. What do they really think about this issue? How do they handle this? Okay, how do I now give them an open question where they can talk freely, and somewhere in that answer, I will hear what I want to know. Do also think about how you set up the room. If you want it to be an intimidating interview, then you sit behind the desk and you make them face you sitting in a chair. But probably that's not what you want. If you intimidate the person and they don't feel comfortable, they are much less likely to speak truthfully. They will try to give you instead the answers that you want to hear. That's not actually going to help you in selecting the best person. So for interviewing, I would say you do everything that is possible to try and make them feel comfortable, even if it puts you at a disadvantage. You give them, you make them feel comfortable, because the more comfortable they are, the likelihood is they'll be more honest. Turn off all interruptions. You ask somebody to guard the door. Do not disturb us whilst we're having this interview. But also turn off your telephone. You do not want to be taking calls or getting messages pinging away whilst you're trying to do an interview. Show the person some respect. That, if they're going to join this organization, you want them to understand that this is a really serious part of the process. So I would definitely say turn off your phone before you start any kind of interviewing. And then what kind of questions are you going to bring up in this interview? Well, certainly to start with, there needs to be some warm-up questions. Questions could be about you. Tell me about yourself. How would a friend describe you? What's the most recent book that you have read? Why? Why did you choose that one? It's friendly, open questions that just get them talking. Partly it's just about warming them up. It could be about them. It could be trying to get to know a little bit about their priorities. Sort of what attracted you to this particular position. What are you hoping to achieve whilst you're here? It could be that you ask about their motivation. You could say, sort of what kind of rewards do you normally seek? Give me an example of a time when you went beyond what was required of you. Why did you do that? You can dig a little bit into their motivation, but it's all very light-hearted. It's warming up. It could be that you ask something about their history. Could be, why are you leaving your current job? Tell me about your proudest achievement. Something like that. Something that just gets them talking. So that's all about warming up. The next section of questions is trying to find out, do they really have what we need in the organization? Obviously, you have already given them a bunch of tests to try and check their skills and maybe even some of their attitudes. But a good interview might check that some of those things are really what we're wanting. So, for example, it could be about leadership, and you could ask them to describe somebody whose leadership they really admire. It could be that you ask them to give an example of, what was one of the hardest decisions that you've ever had to take? Maybe you want to find out how well they can motivate other people, and you can say, tell me about a time where you had to encourage somebody who was resistant to change. How did you encourage them? Did you change their opinion? It may be that you want to check their interpersonal skills, and you could say something like, what irritates you about other people? How do you handle that? Don't feel embarrassed to ask some quite direct questions if need be. So they could be in the areas of leadership. It could be about managing people, motivating, time management, planning and analyzing, finance, IT, innovation, or interpersonal skills. So these questions are about, do they have what we need? The next set of questions is then going to be, do you fit in here? Do you have the attitude that matches with our organizational culture, basically? So you're asking things about their work ethic. You can be finding out, do they fit in with our way of thinking? How do they feel about taking the initiative? How do they handle mistakes? When things go wrong, when things are not how they planned? And in all of this, you're trying to get a sense of, do they fit here? So having asked those questions about do they really fit in, then your final round of questions is asking, so what really makes them the best? Why them and not one of the other candidates? Because by this stage, everybody who is being interviewed has the qualifications and skills and probably attitudes to do the job. So why you? Why should I give the job to you and not to this other person who's up for interview? This could be about checking, do they really understand us as an organization? What are their motivations and how they see the world? Do they really understand what we want from an organization and see? Be careful not to ask leading questions. Oh, you didn't like your last boss, did you? Well, you don't necessarily know that. Don't ask questions which already lead them down a particular path. That's not fair. Also, try not to ask compound questions. Things like, please give me an example of X, then tell me about Y, and then explain yourself as to why you did those two things. That's actually 3 different questions, and it's quite unfair to put that amount of pressure onto the person, so keep questions very simple. Do feel free to take notes, maybe on a form that you've worked out beforehand, where because you're asking these questions looking for particular things, so you should be able to construct a form that all the different interview panel can have that say, did this person mention this thing or not? Did they give the answer we were looking for? That kind of thing. And hopefully the most successful candidate is going to then be given a conditional offer. Obviously, the condition being that their references check out, because that's often the one thing that you can't check beforehand. Do follow up references. If possible, not just in a written way, but actually telephone the person if you can and speak to them. Try and get the truth. Just be really sure, because sometimes people can be tricky. And of course, by the end of this process, you are having to say no to more people than you're saying yes to. So it can be very helpful, and actually I think it is good practice to talk to the people that you are rejecting who didn't pass the test or who didn't get through the interview, and to explain to them what they could do differently next time, how they could improve. Because, if you send somebody away just with "I'm sorry, goodbye," they're not going to be really impressed with your organization. Whereas if you take them to one side and give them a little bit of coaching, there is a chance that they might think differently. So, take that opportunity to see if you can add some value to them, even though you're saying no to them from joining your organization.